Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the reports coming out of what Jeremy Hunt may do in order to fund his tax cuts, because it sounds like he's taking Labour policies. There's a suggestion that the additional benefit for the Conservatives is that it will mess up with Labour's spending plans when Sunak may be just weeks away from calling the election, but it poses problems for the Conservatives as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So the big pre-election budget is just around the corner. It's next week, next Wednesday. The Tories are, as far as I can tell, aiming to achieve three things. First, offer tax cuts as a way of hoodwinking people into thinking that things are getting better. Second, feathering their own nests. So expect stories to emerge in the weeks following the budget about how Sunak will gain financially, as well as those who donate to the Tory party. You know, their election fund isn't going to fill itself. And third, of course, salt the earth for Labour. Labour's Rachel Reeves has been saying that she's going to inherit the biggest economic mess in modern history, essentially, and she's right. But the Tories still want to make it a bigger mess still if they can. Arguably the most obvious sign that the Conservatives are not patriots is that they see no problem with badly damaging the country's economy just to make it harder for Labour to govern. So reports suggest that Hunt is planning some interesting taxation policies. First, he's going to make new taxes up, so special taxes for vaping products, for example. Second, he's reported to be planning to scrap non-dom status. Oh, this is a Labour policy which the Tories kicked back against very hard when they announced it. That they would now consider doing it themselves. That's very interesting. Along with reports that they might be thinking about applying windfall taxes to oil and gas companies. This is arguably more interesting because not only is that also a Labour policy, but announcing it exposes the fact that the Tories are not already doing it. Because Rishi Sunak was eventually dragged as kicking and screaming as Chancellor to windfall taxes. So people sort of think they're already being applied. It's like, you know, whenever I mention it, I get several people going, but aren't windfall taxes already there? It's like, not on oil and gas companies, no. Renewable energy companies, yes, not oil and gas companies. But there are, as Bloomberg is pointing out, multiple layers of interest to these policies. The first is the obvious one. Jeremy Hunt is toying with the idea, we don't know what he's going to do until he announces it, of course, but he's toying with the idea of scrapping non-dom status and applying windfall taxes to oil and gas companies. This is a case of making the rich shoulder more of their share of the tax burden to lighten it for ordinary people. Not that a 2p cut in income tax really saves ordinary people very much, mind you, but Hunt also wants to cut fuel duty, which might be worth more to some people, and there is also talk of another cut to national insurance, given that the one in January didn't fool the voters at all. But nonetheless, if the Tories had a more general attitude of making people with the broadest shoulders take their share of the load, I would dislike them much less. In fact, I might even consider them essentially honourable people with whom I disagree, like many other political parties. These policies would represent the Tories taking left-wing policies from Labour ahead of the election, which raises questions for the Tories like, given that opponents of Sunak already call him a socialist, how is this not going to raise the level of infighting within the party? Or will they agree a truce on the basis that it's just for the election and the measures will never be implemented if the Tories win? After all, in 1992, they announced tax cuts in their pre-election budget and then cancelled them all after the election. They have form for this, which really needs to be made clearer to voters. But there are other risks for the Conservatives as well. These measures are now being reported. So people are thinking, oh, they're planning on scrapping non-dom status. Oh, they're planning on putting windfall taxes on oil and gas companies. And Bloomberg raised the point that, you know, if Hunt's just leaked these measures to gauge public opinion, but then ultimately doesn't implement them, won't it look like Rishi Sunak has personally intervened in order to protect tax breaks for the incredibly wealthy, like, oh, I don't know, people like Rishi Sunak? But what if Hunt does announce these policies? Will he sell them to Tory MPs on the basis that, first of all, you're going to get your tax cuts for ordinary people for the election, so, you know, it's a good thing, and it means Labour have to do a load of work on their spending plans because Jeremy Hunt will have blown a massive hole in them? Because remember, removing tax breaks is a big part of Labour's plan for government in order to fund the investment we need. You know, people keep saying, oh, Labour is just an austerity-like party themselves. Absolute rubbish. They know they need more money to invest. They're planning on spending more money. That's the opposite of austerity. But where does the money come from? Taxation and borrowing. They've already committed to not raising rates of tax for ordinary people. So they've closed, in fact, they've also closed off some other avenues of taxation simply because they worry that ordinary people will think they'd be due it as well, because the Daily Express will definitely say that. But if the Tories close off a couple of the prominent tax breaks and use the money to not invest but cut taxes, other taxes, they give Labour a new hole in their spending plans, which will force them to have to either say they'll get the money from somewhere else, so they'll either have to increase borrowing, increase taxes somewhere else, or drop even more spending plans, attracting more criticism from their supporters. So the calculation for Sunak and Hunt will be this, like, who do these policies cause more damage to, the Tories or Labour? What's it to be? Will Sunak and Hunt actually go socialist a bit just to screw over Labour? Is that how badly they've backed themselves into a corner? And if they do, what will the Tory press and certain Tory MPs have to say on the matter? We're going to be in for a very interesting few, it's crucial few weeks, because this is how March is going to pan out. So next week's the budget. The Conservatives will then have set out their stall. That is the last budget before the election. Hunt can announce a budget whenever he likes, of course. There could be one later in the year. Usually we expect simply an interim budget statement around about November time, October, November time. But, you know, we're not expecting the election to have gone beyond then. So there won't be. This is it. This is the last budget before the election. The Conservatives will already have their campaign machine prepped, ready to roll the second Jeremy Hunt stands up and opens his mouth. Expect the Tories to focus heavily on what they want people to believe are the implications of the budget of the next week or two, because they want to get that message out there before others can go, actually, no, the budget really means this. If I'm right, and the Conservatives do get their poll bounce, I suspect Sunak will then call the election for May the 2nd. Isaac Levidow, who's the party strategist, is still having regular physical meetings in Downing Street. Makes no sense to me unless the election is planned to be imminent. I mean, they can talk every day if they want to. There's no need for Levidow to physically go to Downing Street to do that. Unless you're talking about really top secret stuff because it's really close. It's really inefficient use of time. But if the budget falls flat, because, you know, that attempted tax cut in January fell flat. So if the budget falls flat, or if more scandals come out that overshadows it, I mean, the Lee Anderson thing hasn't gone away. What if Lee Anderson imagine the scenario, because the budget's on Wednesday. So, right, you've got PMQs next Wednesday, then it'll be the budget, right? Imagine the scenario if on Wednesday they're just getting ready for PMQs and Lee Anderson chooses to cross the, I mean, he's not got the Tory whip at the moment, but let's say he chooses to dramatically cross the floor and announce that he's now a Reform UK MP. That might distract from the budget a little bit. But for whatever reason, if the budget falls flat, if their internal polling does not show the public falling for it for whatever reason, what then? Does Sunak call the election anyway in a few weeks and convince his MPs they've got an absolutely wizard campaign just ready to be unleashed, which will totally work, but they can't try it out because then it'll give Labour forewarning? Will they believe him? There's been a lot of work to convince MPs that 1992 is on the cards again, which it absolutely is not, so maybe. Or will Sunak be forced to go long into either late summer or autumn if the polls remain pretty much where they are now? Because where the polls are right now is the Conservatives are going to be lucky to get 100 seats. And that's the average of the polls. Some polls have them in even worse shape. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.